This is the last presentation for Goal 10 on World War II, and so we're just going to dive right in. This last one is called The Effects of World War II, and information can be found on Chapter 20, Section 5 of your orange textbook. We'll address Objectives 10.03, examine the effects of World War II on American life, as well as 10.05, assess the role of organizations established to maintain peace. Our essential question is, what were the major immediate and long-term effects of World War II? As war came to an end in Europe, the big three, that is England, the United States, and Russia, met at the Yalta Conference in 1945. They wanted to discuss post-war Germany and Eastern Europe. They made an agreement that said that Eastern Europe would have free elections to determine the new governments for those countries. They also agreed that Germany would be divided into 4 occupation zones. Later, in Potsdam in 1945, it was a new group representing the same countries, of course, the United States, this time represented by Truman, Great Britain, this time represented by Attlee, and of course Stalin. They discuss Stalin's refusal to allow free elections in Eastern Europe. They also officially proclaimed the occupants and specific zones in Germany. And in the map to the right there, you can see how it was divided and what those zones look like. There was East Germany and East Berlin, which were communist. Then there was West Germany and West Berlin, which were democratic. Within that, those were divided into the British sector, the French sector, and the American sector. So you can see that Germany is, West Berlin. So you can see that Berlin is divided in half. The orange section there on the right is the Soviet sector. The Democratic sector is the yellow, green, and dark green there. The yellow representing the French sector, green, light green, the British sector, and the darker green, the American sector. But that line is interesting because it shows that Eastern Europe had mostly become communist or Soviet controlled. Meanwhile, in China, a civil war had broken out. As you know, there had been kind of a shaky unity between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong during World War II to try to fend off the Japanese. But now that had fallen apart. Chiang Kai-shek was a nationalist. He was a friend of the United States. That's him in the top right. Mao Zedong is a communist, and he's a friend of the USSR. So you can see where this is headed. There's a divide here. Communist and non-communist, US versus USSR. Mao will take over, so he defeats Chiang Kai-shek, adding one big communist nation to the world. After our victory in Japan, General Douglas MacArthur led the occupation, the US occupation of Japan. He worked with them to help write their new constitution, and that included women's suffrage, or the right to vote, the fact that the Japanese military was only to be used for defensive purposes. Also included were democratic reforms and accommodations to provide for a full economic recovery. Also, during this time, many colonies broke free from their imperialist rulers. The imperialist rulers, those including Britain, France, and other countries, Their attention had drifted away from these colonies, and of course, these people saw an opportunity and broke free. As a result, we see two new superpowers that emerge at the end of this. The U.S., okay, where industry boomed, we had military superiority and victory, which gave us much clout, okay, or respect, and the USSR, which had almost complete control of Eastern Europe. In the next presentation, we'll talk about how countries work together to prevent another disaster like World War II from ever happening again.